Good afternoon, everybody, and I hope you all are doing okay. I'm super excited to share my personal learnings on this revised Digital Protection Data Privacy Bill of 22. You guys all know that in India, the G20 summit is actually going on right now, and a lot of focus on digital transformation. And anytime, wherever a G20 happens, usually the key focus drops to IT. And you know that for the past couple of years, digital transformation is like the hottest topic going on. And the timely launch of this revised bill is going to have a lot of implications, especially on enterprise business owners like yourselves who have joined, consumers, and also the way the government themselves operate, right? So in fact, right now, the UN actually tells us that there are around 137 countries out of the 194 who have already implemented a Data Protection Act today. And you guys all know that GDPR is super popular in Europe and CCPA is super popular in America, and several other countries have their own acts. Even countries like Brazil, South Africa, China, Singapore, the list keeps going on. You know what? I actually have some news for you. It was only yesterday that the UK released their own version of the GDPR, which is actually a spin-off from the existing European GDPR called UK GDPR now. So with that said, that's a lot of gyan. So quickly get into the agenda for today that I have for you. So, so what I have for you today is very limited content. I will also be showing you some live demonstration also on the ChainSys platform. And by the end of these 30 minutes, I should be able to convey a few key messages. One, I should be able to give you the objective and applicability of this bill for enterprise business owners. Secondly, I should also be able to touch upon the non-compliance penalties that's going to be imposed on businesses. Thirdly, this bill will require enterprise businesses to have your own data protection officer. And I will also be explaining how I can make that data protection officer's life easy. And finally, with the minimum information provided in this bill, I will share my suggestions on how you can create a DPDP compliant data framework. And please note that this bill is subject to a lot of revision in the coming months. So as a lot of revision keeps happening, I will be able to share more and more suggestions along the way. Okay. And lastly, as I was mentioning earlier, I'm going to be showing a live demo on the ChainSys platform. And if you are a data fiduciary and you're watching this video right now, you can figure out how this can be used in your own industry. Because my demo is not actually focused on any particular industry. So it is just going to benefit the chief data officer. But then if you want any industry specific knowledge on data protection, tune in at the end of the session, drop your questions, and probably Carolyn, myself, and the team, we will get you a lot of other insights. All right. Okay. All right. So I've just summarized the implications of this bill in a nutshell in this slide. So when you look at it, it's going to imply to a citizen, it's going to imply to governments, it's going to imply to enterprises. Okay. So as a citizen, I can finally take control of what companies do with my personal and sensitive data. So what I mean by personal and sensitive data, it can be your email ID, your address, your university, college, your blood group, and whatnot. So the next time you submit your phone number or email ID to purchase something online, you guys know that you're prone to get marketing emails and calls. Sometimes it could be from the same store, but sometimes it could come from different stores as well. So right now, you have the right to question that data fiduciary, whether they have your personal details and whether they have shared it elsewhere. If they don't come back to you, then you can probably complain. But then now you know that there's a lot of power in your hand. So you can even request them to delete that number going forward. Right? So basically, to summarize what I just said, you now have the right to request if your data is stored in an organization. Also, you have the right to correct and erase this data based on this new bill. Right? And please note that for enterprises right now, processing your sensitive data is going to require a lot of consent from you, both from the government side as well as from the enterprise side. Right? So for enterprises, the fines are going to be huge if you do not have a data privacy framework set up. So do note that fresh mandate for data breaches You guys know that a lot of data breaches keep happening. And right now in India, the mandate to complain or lodge or file a case against a data breach is 6 hours. But then you have to notify the government that you have had a data breach. So, so my take is to make your life easier. All right. So what I would suggest is to start focusing a lot on data minimization and start taking stock of what data there is within your organization. Right. So, so with that said, moving on to the obligations. See, India has actually set up a data protection board. Okay. So for you to be able to launch or file a complaint against any data fiduciary if there is a misuse of your personal and sensitive data. So, so what this agency or board would do is to ensure that enterprises, governments, everything are intact with the bill. All right. I'm not going to go too much into the fines, but this is just for you to take a look at. You can see that there are fines of almost up to 250 crores at this point that's been put up. All right. More light on this, probably if you have any questions, you can drop it down to me at the end of the session. Right. Okay. So, so as you have taken in the fines, you can see that the key thing here is as a first timer who has not been familiar with data protection, what you need to keep in mind is you need to start getting compliant by doing a few simple stuff. Okay. So the very first thing is to do a stock taking. You got to take stock of all your personal data, supplier, consumer data that is exposed outside. And you kind of have to ask yourself this one question. Where do I stand in terms of how much personal data I've collected today? Because because you know that as a business, you'll be collecting personal data in terms of PDFs, images, Excel files, and whatnot, right? So take stock of all those links that you're not aware of, right? And the next thing is for you to start figuring out strategies on how you can provide notice to people. These people, the data of the people you have in your system, basically, you got to make sure you send out notices to them that your data is actually residing in your system. All right. So this would ask you to even revisit your KYC practice and figure out collection of too much personal data. Please note that a lot of these data would not even be needed at all for you right now. Okay. And you can see the screen, you can see on top, the very first step is to first secure. The very first step to secure your sensitive data is to first identify it, right? So with all this digitizing happening in India, you know that all government agencies, enterprises, you guys have digitized all your hard paper copies, you've put it into PDFs, images, and other formats, right? So the data can be both in structured as well as in unstructured formats. You can see here that in terms of healthcare, hospitals, numerous patient records can be digitized. They can be as digitized prescriptions with a lot of sensitive data in them, which is also breach. And also, if it were me, right, as a brand manager, if I were collecting data for campaigns, imagine I have a team of 15 who run campaigns every week with different data sets. I'm at a point where I do not audit what I have, and I'm prone to have random contact information that I'm not aware of. So making me non-compliant with no visibility. So the entire thing, what I'm trying to say is we got to start becoming a bit more transparent. For example, if somebody comes and asks me, hey, do you have Aditya's phone number, email ID, and blood group? I got to be able to say, no, I don't have the other two. I just have the phone number right now. So I will be held accountable for holding your data going forward. Okay. And the key advantage that ChainSys as a company and as a product company we bring here is that we built this beautiful platform that can scan through hundreds of data patterns using a lot of algorithms in it, and that's created to identify your sensitive data in both structured which can be in structured or unstructured formats. All right. So now that you've taken stock of data, so I have one question for you to think about by the time I move to my demo. So the, there's a thing about consent which has been spoken in this bill. So imagine if you've been given a notice of consent, especially for withdrawal or deletion of data, how would you be able to deal with it? Because that has to be a strategy thought of by the chief data officer and also by the management of enterprises and government agencies right now. Okay. Okay. I hope I'm not going too fast, but if I am, please, you can drop your questions in the end and I can like slowly run you through each and every single point. All right. Okay. So, so you can see there's a flow diagram here. This is basically how I would do your data identification and remediation. But before I get into this, right, I would like to talk about one particular use case that I was working on. So I was talking to this customer who's got his parent company in the EU, okay, and EU is big for GDPR. But this company has a strong and huge Indian presence right now, okay. So since this company has first complied with GDPR, it complying with DPDP could be a bit easier using the same footsteps, right? So what I felt is they faced a couple of huge challenges. So first thing is stock taking. So before stock taking, you got to understand the tech within the company. There could be several ad hoc dynamic pieces of tech lying around, right? And these guys actually thought, to use a lawyer to implement some of these compliances by themselves. But then a lawyer cannot decide for you whether a 128-bit encryption is better, right? So they needed data experts to this journey, and that's when we came in, right? So the biggest challenge was also to harmonize and standardize grievances, right? That is also a key part of the bill. So more info on this, feel free to wait up and I can like share that at the end of the session. But for this, they had to request their customers and consumers and ensure they were able to find that data. In case if a customer asks you, where's my data? You have to be able to have that data lineage and have the data identification across all your platforms to ensure and tell them, yes, I do have your data. Right? So to repeat what I just told earlier, the idea is to become a bit transparent. Okay. So with all this said, I have a three-step process for this data identification. All right. So what I would do first, you can see on the far left, there's a lot of structured, unstructured sensors, images, videos. So these are all data types that the ChainSys platform can read. All right. So using the platform, I would first scan through all of your structured and unstructured data. All right. So the very second step, I would profile all of it based on the existing data dictionary that is available in the platform, right? Which can distinguish between personal data and non-personal data. Okay. And finally, it's the role of the chief data officer to use the ChainSys platform. They've got very nice UI and screens with which you can audit those unidentified PII data, and then you can classify them as a next step based on high, medium, low risk, or critical data. Right? Okay. So following this identification, final step, the chief data officer can choose how to remediate this data. So imagine I get a request saying delete my data, then the data officer has to go ensure the data is deleted. Also right now, there's an additional thing in the act which says I have the right to correction. So the data officer can also correct the data, meaning if I've changed my address, the postal code is wrong, my phone number is missing, I can then choose to even correct it, right? So meaning right now the data officer using the platform can choose to encrypt, mask, scramble, or even delete sensitive information. Okay. All right. So that's enough talking to be honest. I'll just quickly get into the platform. And what I'm going to show you today in this demo is mainly how you're going to do your data identification and how I'll touch upon all the remediation that you can do. All right. I'm logging into the platform right now. All right. So since we talk a lot about data, you can see that ChainSys has a platform for end-to-end data management. All right, right from data movement, which Zap uses. Data Zap can be used for a lot of data movement, Zens for your analytics, and we have Zen for your master data management, data catalog, smart app builder, and also I'm just going to go into data security, which I'm going to use for identifying your sensitive information. So, so the question here is, See, scanning structured data can be done by a lot of people today, but also scanning unstructured data is a pretty much of a hassle. Okay. So it's sometimes time consuming, but also you got to have the right tool in place, right? As a data management engineer, I've seen other platforms, and I feel that when it comes to the scanning and profiling, ChainSys profiling engine is spot on. Yeah. So the very first step, what I would do is establish my connection. So for this, I've already set up my connection and all of it, connection with my source point. Okay. So for the purpose of this, I'm just profiling structured data. I'm first going to show you the profiling results. Usually profiling takes a bit of time to run. All right. So that's why I've actually executed the profile for you. So as a data officer, what I would do is I would get on to the screen. Once the profiling is done, I will have to validate the profiling results. Okay. All right. So my very first role, I've scanned through multiple tables. Okay. And after all of the scanning and profiling, you can see that the data has been classified here. Okay. You can decide the category that the data has to be in. Okay. So for example, it's classified as telephone number. Initially, the tool has the AI and ML logics to classify it. But then if you feel there's some mistake, any day, you can't really trust the tool all the time. But in case you want to also view your data and ensure, yeah, these are a couple of phone numbers just for the clarity of it, you can see that, yeah, that those are phone numbers and dates or whatever. Okay. So this is very important for a chief data officer to start off with. Okay. So once this identification is done, okay. So what I would do is imagine as a data officer, I'm first gonna approve all of it, claiming all of this is sensitive data. So once I've categorized all of it together, then my very next step is to choose what type of remediation I have to do. So in terms of remediation to track back, I had already told you that you can mask, encrypt, scramble, or even delete your data. So here you can see that I can make my own remediation rules for each particular field. Say, for example, if the academic qualification is so super important, I can categorize that as high risk. And my remediation types, as I was telling you before, I can choose to keep it, delete, scramble, mask, or encrypt it. In terms of masking, right? Say if I were to mask your email ID, I can just mask the first part of it or the entire email, and just split it up. So a lot of options are provided to you as a data officer. And if you might have noticed, the configuration, I might have had a bit of a time, say like 5, 6 clicks to do it. But then as a data officer, you see that in terms of identification, I've just done around 4 clicks. And in terms of remediation, I might have around another 5, 6 clicks. So meaning your life is super easy right now. So once all of this remediation is done, okay, I'm going to be moving. Once all of the rules, everything is done, I have to remediate against that target, right? Whatever I scan. So all of that is available. And for the very next step after the approval, I'm going to push the data back. So that's also there. With that said, right, I'm actually going to give a pause to the demo. Carolyn, are there any questions coming up as I'm talking?
Yes.
I can start addressing some questions right now. And yeah, please.
Okay, Aditya, thank you so much. Feel free to shoot in your questions and in the question box in your GoToWebinar control panel. We'll take them up. Yes, I have few here already. So let me start with the first question, Adi. According to the DPD, you have the right to data correction. Can you correct data after identification?
Yeah, we could. I already told you, yes, you can. So we have very neat UI set up, right? So I was just showing you that the data security officer can also correct it and also remediate it. You've got two options.
Okay, and will the data be staged?
Okay, this is a very important question because based on data privacy, I should not be staging any data because it's all sensitive information. I should not be staging it. So the answer is no, data will not be staged and will directly be addressed on the pinpointed endpoint. So meaning that's why I showed you the connection in the start of the demo. So you connect directly to the endpoint. You don't stage data here.
Okay. When you are masking any data, will it be referred to anonymization or
When
pseudonymization?
I'm masked, could you repeat that question, Carolyn?
Sure. So when you're masking any data, will it be referred to
Mm-hmm.
anonymization or a pseudonymization?
When I'm masking the data, yes, it will be anonymized. obviously. You can't counter that.
Okay. What encryption standard algorithms do you use?
So right now, the ChainSys platform use a market standard AES 256 algorithm.
Does the tool support both static and dynamic masking?
Static and dynamic masking.
Yes, static and dynamic masking.
It does support static. I will have to get back on the dynamic. Do keep it in mind. I can circle back on that.
Sure. Can we revoke data once scrambled or masked?
The thing is, you're doing it for a reason as a chief data officer, but it's based on the best practice and security guidelines. We do not support this, and I do not think you should be revoking data.
Will the seller and buyer relationship be deemed consent?
Okay, so see, the thing is, this act has a lot of mixed opinions on deemed consent. Okay, I will first explain what this deemed consent is. So imagine I'm giving my number at a restaurant and in the name of booking a table. So that is deemed consent. But if that restaurant gives my number to an insurance company, then that's not deemed consent. So when you look at it, currently the deemed consent in healthcare is super tricky. So basically, a deemed consent is only for data that you give for emergencies in healthcare. Okay, but the whole law and bill does not address a lot of these claims, and it does. So basically, if you're a healthcare provider, you have to tell what this data is going to be used for. And you've got to ask the patient whether it's an yes or no, whether you can use the data. So just to circle back, the buyer and seller relationship will be deemed consent, but I should not misuse that data.
The government collects a lot of data. What if they share that with a third party? Is it a breach in data privacy?
So, in terms of the government, right, the bill actually says that the government can take data from a third party, but they can't share it to almost everybody. There are some exemptions to which they can share, but there has to be disclosure wherever it's needed. This part in the bill actually needs a bit more refining.
Thank you, Adi. I think we've come to the end. Any more questions? We still have a few more minutes. We could take a couple of more questions as well.
Oh my God, on the dot, it's
Yes.
29.
So now that we've covered all our questions, Adi, is there anything else you want to cover before a wrap up?
So, see, one thing I'd like to cover before I wrap up is that in case you want to kickstart this data identification, that's one of our sweet spot. And I would suggest you drop your email ID in this chat or personally email me or Carolyn, and we could even pay you a visit and assess your data first and identify all those PII for you. And this could give you a head start to getting compliant.
Thank you so much, Aditya, for this wonderful session. Thank you all for joining, taking time today. Feel free, just like Aditya said, feel free to drop in any questions or queries or suggestions that you may have. And also visit chainsys.com for updates on our upcoming webinar or any white papers that you may want. I look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Thank you once again.
Thank you guys. Have a lovely day. Cheers.